Are you getting more fit? How do you know if you are? Hey everyone, it's Graeme Street. You're joining me back here on cyclo-core.com. And another set of quick tips today, actually going back to some questions I've been having a lot since my last podcasts concerning both VO2 max and threshold power. If you haven't listened to those, you can listen here on the website, cyclo-core.com. Download them for free. Truckloads of information. A lot of what I'm getting for questions comes down to helping you understand how to realize where you're getting more fit. And there's different ways to measure that. I'm going to go over 3 or 4 of them today to help you understand from old school methods like speed and distance to the more high-tech level of using some kind of power meter of some sort, and of course that in-between of heart rate. Let's talk about the old school method first, speed over distance. I think this is the most simplistic way for any cyclist of any level to realize if they're getting more fit, more efficient. And remember, fitness does not mean efficiency, and efficiency is not always in relation to fitness. We're going to talk about that here in a second. When I go out for a ride, if I go out and I do my typical 20-mile loop, my 20-mile local time trial, that's a set distance. Let's say it's 20 miles in length. Left turns, right turns, the same loop every time, within reason. Obviously, dealing with traffic and weather conditions, wind conditions will have a dramatic effect on how fast I can move from point A to point B. But in general, it can give you a good consensus of not just how much power or energy you're able to sustain, but how efficient you are at delivering that power, okay? So if I go out for that same 20-mile loop again and again and again, one good way to determine if I'm becoming more fit and more efficient is to have that time gap get smaller for the same distance. Are we in agreement on that? Now, if you look at something like Strava, Strava is based on the old method of speed over distance across the boards. Although they can give you an estimated power curve, and if you're using a heart rate monitor or a power meter, it will document that information for you. But at the end of the day, most people that are utilizing Strava are there to see if they can get faster from point A to point B. Whether that's a king of the mountain, whether that's a segment of flat roads, undulating roads, a hill climb, whatever it may be, the end result is to become faster over the same distance or time. And that's really what I think most people are looking for. The downsides of using speed and distance is that, again, it doesn't accommodate for, if I go out for that same 20-mile loop and I have a westerly wind at 20 miles an hour, is that going to have an effect on the loop pattern? Absolutely it's going to. And depending on the terrain or the tarmac within that, it's going to be a big determinant of helping me understand that as well. So you might be really fit and go out and just not have the weather and tarmac conditions work in your favor. And as a result of that, you may get a slower time for something that you should have expected to see a faster time. Does that mean that you're not fit? Not necessarily. And if you actually had a heart rate monitor or a power meter on, which we're going to talk about next, it might give you even more of an indicator of that fitness result. Second component, and this one is a little bit more updated, a little bit more new school, which would be using a heart rate monitor. And we talked about this at length in the VO2 Max podcast, as well as in the Threshold Redefined podcast. Heart rate is great. It really is. It gives you more of a physiological appraisal of your cardiac function, how well your system is flowing internally. And this is utilizing, obviously, multiple mechanisms and parts of our physiology, which, again, if you go back to the VO2 Max podcast in particular, I'll give you full details of what we're talking about. It's quite descriptive of what we went over. But in a nutshell, if I take that same 20-mile loop, how do I know if I'm getting more fit in relation to heart rate using a heart rate monitor? Well, 2 things need to happen, or 2 things can happen to show that relation of improvement of fitness. Number 1, if I go out and I do that same 20-mile loop and I'm able to sustain, let's say, the same amount of speed, again, going back to speed, for the same time period of that 20 miles, but my heart rate was 2, 3, 4 beats lower, that's a great indicator that you become more fit because your cardiac system is having to work less or spend less energy to create the same amount of speed. Now again, this is also determined on tarmac conditions, wind conditions, traffic conditions. Someone got in your way at a stoplight, which slows down your time. These things have to be factored in, but a still overall good appraisal that, hey, I went out for that 20-mile loop, and usually it takes me 56 minutes to do. Today I did it in 54 minutes. More importantly, my heart rate average for that 20-mile set period dropped 2 beats. That tells me that you become more efficient. Now, efficiency can happen in a bunch of different ways. You can use your training to improve efficiency, your cardiac output. Again, we talked about that at the cellular level, the cardiac level, the muscular level, everything. All those things can come into play. And we can also see an improvement in how efficient we are on the bicycle, our leg speed, utilizing our muscular endurance, improving our leg speed in certain circumstances that when we're out on the bike. This allows us to waste less energy. And remember, it's the removal of the waste that allows a cyclist to become more efficient. A more efficient cyclist at the same power or heart rate should be able to produce more overall speed and endurance. Is that making sense? Another quick thing with heart rate, and this one's important. I still say that the most valuable tool of the heart rate is to let your body know when you could exert more. So I'll give you an example. I had a customer contact me via email just a day ago, and he's using my Cyclo-90 base program. He's finishing, I think, week number 4, so he's only a third of the way through. He's done his zone 4 power test at the beginning and at the end of week 4, okay? He saw what? He saw his power go up from, I think, 201 watts to 211 or 215. I can't remember the exact number. So a marginal gain, I'd say about a 3-4% gain, which is great. But when I looked at his heart rate for the first test went from 163 on average, okay, down to 144. And what I told him is this is great. So we've seen an increase in power and we've seen a drop in heart rate. However, letting your heart rate drop 15 to 16 beats tells me that you could have pushed yourself much harder on the second test and more than likely yielded a much higher power output. So if he had set a goal to maintain the same 163 beats per minute as he did in test 1, his power should have jumped, at least on paper, absolutely, to 235 to 245, up from 200, which would be a monster jump. And again, this is where your mental ability comes into play. If you're seeing a drop off in heart rate, okay, in general, we want to begin to push the heart rate back towards that red line to see an increase in power. Again, this is where we move to number 3 of measuring your fitness, which is utilizing a power meter, which absolutely, unequivocally gives you the best indicator of are you getting more fit. And the reason why is it eliminates a lot of the variables that tells you how efficient you are. So if I go out for the same 20-mile loop, and my pedaling inefficiency is terrible, I'm not very aerodynamic, I'm going to see kind of these spikes all over the place in my power. And more importantly, I'm not going to see an overall normalized power improve, which is really what we want to see. So if I go out and I see that same 20-mile loop, I want to see either an increase in power, which should, on paper, not always, but on paper, should denote a faster overall average speed. Again, the big player there is how efficient you are with that power. So if you're getting more powerful, you're getting more fit, but you're still propped up into the wind and you're resisting a lot, then you're not going to see an improvement in speed. So if you're coming back to your Strava and saying, well, why didn't I get that King of the Mountain, or why didn't I get a PR? Well, it's simple. If you were throwing out more power, but you're wasting half of it because you're not in a good, solid position, you haven't addressed your back flexibility, you haven't addressed your core, you haven't addressed your leg speed, if you haven't addressed those issues, then you're wasting that gain in power, and the numbers may be misleading when we're going back to speed and distance. You following me? Secondly, with the power meter and with heart rate is what I would call the recovery interval. So if you're going out for that same 20-mile loop and you decide to designate it into maybe 3 chunks of 2 miles at zone 4, zone 5 plus, both on power and or heart rate, okay? And you see an improvement in that power, but more importantly, you see your heart rate recovering faster to a specified number, quicker. That's the best overall indicator of fitness improvements. What I'm always gearing for my customers using Cyclo-90 base, and definitely the in-season protocol, is the end game is to get you more efficient with the power that you've gained. So the power goes up, okay? Even if it goes up marginally, if I can get you more efficient in utilizing that power, the net return for speed performance is going to go up dramatically, in fact, exponentially, okay? You can see riders all the time that have become marginally more powerful, but they've become a lot more efficient with what they already have. That's when you see speed performance go up. More importantly, that end game is to make those recovery intervals and that repeatability process go up dramatically. So it's one thing to go out and do 10 minutes of zone 4 plus effort at good efficiency. It's another thing to repeat that again and again and again within one workout, within 1 week, within 1 month, seeing that repeatability go up and the recovery time go down. If the recovery time goes down between workouts and or intervals within a workout, that is your absolute best indicator of fitness. When you look at a pro coach with a pro cyclist, what they're looking for is to get a certain level of power per kilogram, okay, over time. More importantly, how many times can they repeat that effort and how quickly can they recover from it? And it's the recovery process that makes all the difference. My friends, I hope these tips are helpful. All of these things, speed, distance, heart rate, and power, all have value. They can all give you an overall appraisal. The important thing here is to see the forest for the trees and not rely too much on any one component. You want to balance that out, and always remember, it comes down to you and using your brain more than just your body. If you've got questions for me, you can leave them here on the page. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, you can do so above or below, or just click on the YouTube button here and go subscribe to cyclo-core on YouTube. If you're not using the Cyclo 90 base and you want to improve speed, power, efficiency, it'll be a great place to start. And if you've already done Cyclo 90 base, I know many of you are, you want to move to the Cyclo 90 in season, where we're really going to be harping more on that rest recovery period, improving the repeatability of harder efforts, and getting you geared up for your favorite goals. I will talk to you soon.